Mortal Kombat lore is one of my favorites in all of gaming history, and I put the Midway era right up there with things like Dark Souls and From Software's other work. There's a mythological quality to that Midway era that the NRS era has never really managed to capture. Pre-release, I was hopeful MK1 would finally bring that quality of the franchise back, because of the way NRS was finally showing some small amount of love to the 3D era characters. At first, I thought Mortal Kombat 1 was going to pull off the impossible, following up the fairly awful story of Mortal Kombat 11. MK11's biggest problem, beyond the Hourglass and its keeper Kronika, is the fact that it is more focused on fan service than the raw substance of the plot and lore. On the other hand, MK1 starts out fairly well, with its focus on characterization, tastefully approaching the remixed timeline while also properly separating itself from the worst elements of MK11's story. However, this quickly takes a bad turn, as the story explodes in this multiple timeline battle for control of reality. The 3-act structure of MK1 is a particularly painful slap to the face of 3D MK fans, as the 3 acts of the story are themed around the 3 6th generation MK games. Deadly Alliance starts out the story, providing the backdrop for the revised characters and essentially functioning as the plot's exposition. The rising action of the plot is themed around deception, with the introduction of the Dragon King's army and Damashi. And finally, the climax, Falling Action and Denouement are themed around Armageddon, with the way MK1 mirrors the Temple of Argus assault scene. In this way, NRS pays lip service to the 3D era without providing the quality of storytelling, writing, and reverence present in MK9 and MKX. And today, Mortal Kombat's painful plot continues with Khaos Reigns, the expansion that dropped last week. You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and in this video I'll be reviewing the story of Khaos Reigns and the lore implications of its ending. I make weekly gaming videos every single Friday on a variety of gaming topics, with one video a month at least dedicated to Mortal Kombat. If you like what you see in this video, you'll definitely want to subscribe. With all of that established, let's dive right in.
Unpredictable. You are in no way prepared to stop the pain you will endure.
Starting out, Havik makes some crazy claims about how much suffering will be subjected to under his chaotic rule, and the problem with openings like this is that they feel incredibly forced if the main villain doesn't carry their weight. Havik is legit one of my favorite characters from this franchise, but this story expansion doesn't do him the perfect justice. In terms of character design and atmospheric characterization, NRS really knocks it out of the park with this expansion. However, in terms of dialogue, motivation, and environmental storytelling, Khaos Reigns leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I'm not going to go through this story beat for beat, but I am going to talk about several specific sections. One of the major criticisms of both MK11 and MK1's main campaigns is the marvelization of their narratives. That is, the implementation of superhero themes, archetypes, and motifs in the core fabric of the game's complete package. This comic book influence is even more obvious from the first frame of Khaos Reigns, as the training simulation Sector and Cyrax engage in looks eerily similar to the Danger Room from X-Men, and obviously the designs of cybernetic ninja suits are clearly inspired by Iron Man's creations. Khaos Reigns' first major plot point is the Lin Kuei's attack on Kuai Liang's wedding to Harumi, and it is here that some early cracks in the writing for this expansion show, as Cyrax is given her suit of cyber armor, despite the fact that both Sector and Sub-Zero know that Cyrax will turn against them if she should learn the truth of what happened during the main campaign of the base game. Naturally, Kuai Liang does divulge the truth, and who would have thunk it, but Cyrax turns on her previous allies, saving Scorpion and Smoke from certain death. I think this section is designed as exposition for the characters of Cyrax and Sector, and it does an okay job at that. The motivations and relationships of the characters are introduced, explored, and developed in a short time frame, which is quite a feat, given the short length of the expansion. And this whole wedding assault scene just provides the perfect explanation as to how Sub-Zero and Sector are captured and taken to Outworld for judgment by the new Empress, Melina, who thankfully shows her bend towards some level of ruthless justice. Mortal Kombat has always been a bloody franchise, and it has always proven to be a disappointment to me how scared NRS are of killing off characters post MK's 9 and X. I get why they wouldn't want to this early on in the expansion because killing the new characters off this early would be lame, but no one of substance ever seems to really die in MK11 or MK1, and every death that does happen is made irrelevant almost immediately because of the multiverse nature of the Hourglass arc. So, of course, Liu Kang and Kitana are able to convince Mileena to spare the lives of the traitors. This judgment scene does provide some cool developments to the overall story of this third timeline though, as Mileena references the fact that General Shao is ravaging the wastes of Outworld, building a rebellion to overthrow her. This is something that shows up between Kitana, General Shao, and Raiko's endings as well, and I do like this little nugget of detail. It does add to the one lore development in Khaos Reigns that is tantalizing, something that I'll be discussing more in the next section of this review. After this, Titan Havik appears, absolutely devastating the gathered combatants and taking Geras back to his timeline. Now, NRS really got Havik right in terms of choreographed characterization, as the way he fights is just perfect. Tossing his head through the portal is perhaps the best possible introduction of the character, especially since this is foreshadowing for later. After all, Havik uses his head as a flail to fight against Liu Kang, Kung Lao, and Raiden all at the same time. In this way, Havik's combat style matches his personality quite well, and it makes it even more of a damn shame with the way the rest of this expansion goes. You see, only about 30% of this expansion's story uses its time well. Most of the runtime is spent on filler fights or filler side characters. The scene where Bihan is turned into Noob Saibot and Havik starts extracting Geras' time crystals is incredibly significant. In this scene, it is reiterated that Liu Kang's Geras is essentially Geras Prime, as he is the only Geras to be exposed to every other timeline in existence. Havik needs the time crystals from his body so that he'll be able to locate and merge all other timelines into his, ensuring total, complete chaos for all eternity. This goal suits Havik extremely well, and what's more, he requires the power of certain objects to complete this task, the Kami Dogu.
What are Kami Dogu? You don't know.
The Kami Dogu are from Deception, my favorite game in the franchise. In this game, the Kami Dogu have the ability to reshape the realities of all other timelines when gathered together. But what Havik apparently doesn't know is that there is a seventh, incredibly important piece of this puzzle, Shinnok's Amulet. With Geras' time crystals and the Kami Dogu, Havik will be able to merge all the realms into one, and the prospect of this possibility is genuinely exciting. I don't like the multiverse aspect of this Hourglass arc, and the writers have contrived a way via the reintroduction of the Kami Dogu to undo this element of this third timeline. Considering that the Kami Dogu were the most powerful relics in the Midway era of the lore, I am incredibly hyped to see them return to the franchise, something I'll talk about more in the lore section of this video. Sector, Cyrax, and Scorpion are then sent on a mission to retrieve Geras, and while in Havik's domain, they ally themselves with Jonathan Cage, a World War II soldier version of Johnny, Emperor Rain, and Empress Tanya. In general, I find most of the encounters from this point in the game until the end to be filler, but there are a few good scenes mixed in with this mess. Emperor Rain shows just how much of classic Rain's character was determined by Argus casting him out, as this version of the character is honorable and noble just because he was raised by Argus and Delia. Alongside him, Empress Tanya reflects his noble traits, making them a perfect pair for one another. Likewise, Li Mei takes a barbaric turn in this dimension, and in the past, ruled this timeline's version of Outworld alongside Raiko. The Chaos Coliseum scene is full of crazy interesting shots, such as when the Haviks rip off their arms to high-five one another before tossing their arms into the bloodied sand below, or when that one Havik hits the gong with his own head. Here, Quan Chi and Li Mei fight, which I suspect is a reference to Deadly Alliance, as the costume Li Mei is in is one of her 3D era ones. She loses here, much like she does during her Deadly Alliance ending. Liu Kang's champions are then spotted by Chaos Kenshi's Sento, and they are tossed into these underground catacombs full of traps, which kind of reminded me of that 1997 Canadian horror film Cube, as Havik designed these hallways of horrors so that escape is impossible. Every path leads to the same place, a cavern host to a skeletal dragon, the tortured husk of Orin. This is something I was genuinely not expecting, and as a fan of 3D era MK, is a particularly enjoyable bit of fan service. Orin is the dragon responsible for watching over Taven in the ages leading up to Armageddon, and the fact that NRS is finally referencing this era of the lore does make me hopeful that MK13 will be a proper return to form for the entire scope of Mortal Kombat's vast cast of characters. As soon as I realized this is Auron, I knew she was going to portal them out of Havik's trap. Now there is a problem with this scene though, as Titan Havik tries to stop Auron from sending them on their way. This is counter to Havik's characterization as a cleric of chaos, as the original version of Havik appreciated and even promoted the disruption of his plans, as that brought him closer to the truest essence of chaos. This is not the only time where Titan Havik sacrifices his sacrilegious beliefs in favor of more traditional antagonist plotting, and this just does not fit him. This was the perfect opportunity for NRS to create a brand new type of villain, one who didn't care if his plans were corrupted, one that welcomed such disruptions and integrated them into the completion of their quest. That type of villain would have been incredibly difficult to write, but would have made this character stand out way more among the other combatants. Once in the Citadel, the heroes are confronted by Noob Saibot, but they defeat him in short order, rescue Geras, and bring both back to Liu Kang's dominion. Liu Kang is able to purge Havik's chaos from Bihan's mind quite quickly afterward, essentially undoing the uniqueness of Noob Saibot's characterization. Bihan and Noob Saibot are the same character, but each is the outward expression of a different side of his soul. Bihan shows more of his humanity, whereas Noob Saibot is typically the pure, unfiltered expression of his darker tendencies. It's a shame that that aspect of Noob Saibot is reversed so soon. The fight choreography between Bihan and Kuai Liang is extremely sick though, especially that moment where Scorpion spears Noob Saibot, only for Noob's shadow to distract him long enough for Noob to Uno reverse Scorpion's advantage. Naturally, Titan Havik is mighty miffed that his Kamidogu were stolen right from under his nose. Wait a minute, that's not quite right. Havik doesn't have a nose. From under his chin then? That'll have to do, I guess. Assaulting Liu Kang's timeline once again, Havik fuses with the Kamidogu by embedding them in his chest and flees to finish his master plan. Using the power of the Kamidogu, Titan Havik begins to remake the fabric of reality, but before he can finish, Liu Kang's champions succeed at defeating Havik's Chaos Zealots. Surrounded, Titan Havik lives up to his name as the Cleric of Chaos by ripping off his arm, spawning a new soldier from it. Each of his clones begin to do the same, and within seconds, he has a whole new army.
Great! Now we're fighting math? I hate math!
Noob Saibot squares up against Titan Havik, making the final fight of this chaotic conflict one of a mortal against a titan, a god in the flesh. That is the core theme of Mortal Kombat, and I do like that it is represented here. Within the fight itself, Titan Havik has a few extra moves from his base version, as the power of the Kamidogu allows him to do this beam attack and to detonate himself before reforming again. Winning the fight, Noob rips Havik apart over and over again, until Liu Kang stops him from dealing the killing blow, for he fears that finishing Havik off would lead to the erasure of the denizens of that chaos timeline. Freezing Bihan in a pocket of time, Liu Kang imprisons him, promising Sector that he will do his best to reverse the process of chaosification Havik subjected Bihan to. And that's how Khaos Reigns ends, with a whimper. At the end of the day, only 4 things of substance happened over the course of this story. Number 1, the Kamidogu are reintroduced. Number 2, the Kamidogu have the ability to fuse all timelines into one once again. Number 3, Bihan remains in his Noob Saibot state at the end of the game. And number 4, Titan Havik still lives, meaning he may show up again in MK13. Each of these things are significant, but I still find myself disappointed with this story, as NRS didn't commit to the scope of danger this sort of conflict should have. This problem is the same one the main campaign had too, as none of the deaths in this expansion matter to the story of the series. Emperor Rain dying doesn't matter because the reign of the main campaign, the one that will likely show up in MK13, is still alive. Neither of the 2 Li Meis dying matters because the Captain Li Mei of Melina's City Watch is still alive. None of the deaths, save for Titan Shang Tsung's and Titan Quan Chi's, matter in either Mortal Kombat 1 campaign. And this is just a missed opportunity. Characters have to die from time to time in stories, otherwise the risk of death lacks any real weight. This story would have been better if Titan Havik had managed to mess up the fabric of reality just a little middle or something. Maybe his actions could have led to an event foreshadowing the primary conflict of the next game, something the endings the base game have already managed to do on their own. And speaking of endings, the character endings that come with this expansion aren't particularly fantastic either. The best thing to come out of them is the revelation that Shinnok's amulet is in Liu Kang's timeline, and this is something that will likely show up again in MK13. But even more so than this game's story, the lore really suffers from several elements in this expansion. As I mentioned in the previous block, I've got some real grievances with Havik's characterization. Watch this scene from Deception where Shujinko learns the ways of chaos from Havik.
Well done.
Well done? You tried to kill me.
Nonsense. How could I teach you the way of chaos if there was an agreement, a structure to the lesson?
Oh, I think I understand. I was learning from the unpredictable nature of experience, not from a structured tutorial. I did not realize you had no intentions of harming me when you attacked, and therefore I learned to adapt to what I perceive to be a real threat.
You are correct, except I would have killed you if you had given me the chance. I was quite serious.
You see how Havik thinks in this scene and how it is different from Titan Havik's philosophy? Now I know these are not the same exact character, but for Havik to be true to his roots, he needs to think in the same messed up way he does in Deception. Another example of this is in Cabal's Deception ending, where Havik is impressed by the way Cabal betrays him.
Cabal slew Havik and took the Dragon King's heart for himself. Havik was most impressed.
And this is what I mean by Titan Havik not really fitting the established ethos of his character. Deception era Havik is just the rawest, most unrefined version of that character, and relaunching him without that element makes the Titan Havik feel like a neutered version of his classic chaotic self. Beyond this, the design of the Chaos timeline itself is only half right. The floating, shifting, mangled platforms within Havik's citadel are an excellent element of his timeline, but this sort of effect should be more common. In Deception, the denizens of the Chaos Realm worship water because of its unpredictable nature, as Havik tells Shujinko during this conversation.
They seek to restrict the flow of our water, something we hold sacred. Water was not meant to be controlled. Its shapeless, fluidic nature is a blessing.
In this same section of Deception, you can see the differences in the way the inhabitants of the Chaos Realm dress in comparison to the individuals residing in Havik's domain. Both of these elements were really core to the Chaos Realm, and as such, they're really core to Havik. They needed to be here. Another place where I noticed this disconnect from the Chaos Realm roots of Havik is the design of his laboratory. This place is far, far too symmetrical to be a place hosting Havik's experiments with the Kamidogu. And in addition to this, the redesigns of the Kamidogu also don't work for me. As it stands, they look much more like Infinity Stones than the reality-maintaining artifacts they were in Deception. Like, I can see hints of their old design when they are embedded in Havik's chest, as they vaguely look like their original versions, but why are they so small? These things used to have specific places for them in the Nexus, and were individually the size of Shujinko's whole torso. In fact, there's a lot of things modern MK could learn by looking at the older games, like Deception. The conquest design in Deception is actually fantastic, as it focuses primarily on its tutorialization of the game's systems, which is what this mode should be. Making these sections about learning combos and then testing what the player learned through more difficult encounters, instead of these half-assed fights where, if I want to play well, I've got to leave the campaign to practice with the character to stand a chance in the match, would make the story campaigns serve dual purposes. Firstly, they provide the player with the story, but they also provide them with a scaffolded approach to the gameplay, and scaffolding the learning process of a fighting game is a crucial step in the continued enjoyment of the game from new or rusty players. Additionally, the free-roaming nature of Deception's campaign would allow for more atmospheric storytelling, which is a missing element from the modern MK titles. Storytelling in games does not need to be limited to cutscenes and voiced lines. This franchise used to be so much deeper than that, and I hope with MK13 and any other expansions for MK1 that the NRS writing team takes that into account. Not everything about Khaos Reigns is bad though, as the stage is now properly set for Onaga's return to the franchise between the reintroduction of the Kamidogu, Shujinko's presence in Kung Lao's ending, Onaga's appearance in Reiko's ending, and Shinnok's amulet appearing in Sector's ending. These 4 things make this expansion's existence worthwhile, since it makes me hopeful we'll get a lore-rich game like Deception once again. It may be a pipe dream, but it's one I'll hold on to for as long as I possibly can. There is one major elephant in the room leading up to this expansion that any lore and story-based review needs to talk about, and that's where we're going next. Cyrax and Sector have historically always been male characters, but in Khaos Reigns they are female. Historically, they have always ended up as soulless cyborgs as well, which has also changed this time around. The latter of these 2 changes makes a lot of sense since they exist within Liu Kang's timeline, and he likely would have shifted elements of Sector's history around to push them away from the traditional cyber initiative. And I personally don't hate the redesigned suits because I realized something from the first moment I saw them that I've not heard anyone else mention. The suits being designed this way makes Cyber Sub-Zero a real possibility for MK13. Because the writing team won't have to essentially kill off Sub-Zero to make him a cyber ninja, they'll likely be more willing to bring back Cyber Sub, which is a character many people have been asking for ever since his pseudo appearance via Triborg in MKX. This means that Noob Saibot, Sub-Zero, and Cyber Sub-Zero may all be playable in the next game, because the writers could easily contrive some stupid way for Noob Saibot's corruption to be reversed during the campaign of MK13. They already planted that seed with this expansion, with the way Liu Kang said he may be able to reverse Titan Havik's corruption with time. And yes, I know Noob was freed by Sector and is on the loose, building up his forces so that he may fight against Liu Kang in the future, but that doesn't mean Liu Kang's champions can't capture him during the events of the next game. If Shujinko is back, imagine what sort of moveset he could have if he's able to copy the movesets of all 3 versions of Bihan. That would be literally so sick. As for the gender bending of our favorite bottles of ketchup and mustard, I don't entirely hate or love this. Let me explain. I would have preferred Cyrax staying as a man because I don't see any benefit the character nor story gains by changing that element of the character. I don't even think this is an inclusion decision either, as it is counterintuitive to remove a black man from the series since there's only 4 in the franchise. There are fewer black women, sure, but that disparity is not so large as to warrant this. Lots of people claim this to be a DEI or forced inclusion thing, and I just don't see the logos or pathos behind that from the developer's side. As for Sector, I actually don't hate this change because there is something the story and lore of MK can gain from changing this element of Sector's characterization. It is obvious how Sector feels about Bihan, and her feelings aren't all platonic either. That's the vibe I get from them anyway. It is possible this is a change Liu Kang made to keep Bihan more in line, since love is the strongest material to craft an unbreakable bond with. If their relationship develops, we could see Sector craft cyber armor for Sub-Zero and Noob, and wouldn't it be sick to get a cyber Noob or something like that in the next game? If changing Sector into a woman creates something like that alongside an awesome romance, I wouldn't mind it at all personally. So, is Khaos Reigns a good expansion from a story and lore perspective? With everything considered, I would have to say no. There are good things here, and elements of this present a possibility for future greatness in the series. But this isn't the first time the writing in an NRS MK game has hinted at a great story only to go in a wildly different and worse direction. And that's the video, my guys. What do you think of Khaos Reigns' story? Let me know in the comment section below, and while you're there, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell if you want more gaming videos made by me. I've been posting polls recently asking my community to rank all of the animalities in this game for a video I'm planning to put out in November alongside a deeper analysis of NRS's total MK plotline and quality of writing. Now, I do have to say that this is not strictly a Mortal Kombat channel, as I'm a variety gamer through and through. Next week, I'll be sharing 10 horror game recommendations, and the week after that, I'll be reviewing Mega Man X2. If that doesn't explain the vast variety of things you can expect to see on this channel, nothing will. I do love Mortal Kombat though, and I do promise that there will be at least one Mortal Kombat video every single month. And I've got loads of ideas for Mortal Kombat videos that no one else on YouTube has ever thought to make. Keeping up with me is the only way to ensure you don't miss out on those. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have an awesome day, my friend.